Welcome to the Earthworks Podcast, where our team will share the jargon of carbon from many of our turf friends from the past 30 years.
Welcome, everybody, to another Earthworks Podcast. I'm Joel Simmons. We are live and talking to our friend Justin Mandon from one of my favorite golf courses in the world, I think. And I was just reading this since I did a little bit of homework on this, but I was reading this. This is a Alister McKenzie course. And he actually says, this is on your website, he actually says that this was his favorite course. Is that really a true story, or did you guys make that up?
There's been quite a few quotes from Alister McKenzie, obviously that being one of them. He decided to live here on the golf course, and he lived the end of his life here. So assuming that he traveled many places in the world and built a lot of amazing golf facilities, for him to decide to live at Pasatiempo, there's some truth to that quote.
Well, now, do you think that's because it's in Santa Cruz, California, or because he really loved the golf course? And he ended up his career surfing and hanging out with the hippies down at the beach. I don't know. What was it?
I don't know. Obviously, there's both. I mean, Santa Cruz is an amazing place to live in the country, but Pasatiempo is definitely an amazing golf course.
So it is truly one of my favorite golf courses. I mean, I've known it before even you got over there, but it is a spectacular course. Tell us a little bit about this golf course that you get the privilege of managing every single day.
Yeah, it's really, I was fortunate enough to grow up really close to Pasatiempo. I mean, I grew up 20 minutes away from here. And so I had heard all the stories about Pasatiempo as a kid. Golfing around this area, and really didn't even have the opportunity to play it till I was about 19 years old. But the first time you come out and you see this property, you're just going to be completely blown away. I mean, there are features to this property that you're just not going to see at other golf courses. You can go to other McKenzie golf courses, and I've been fortunate to play quite a few of them, and you're going to see how unique the greens are and the undulations, and you're going to see how deceptive he is. With his layering and the bunkering, but there's features out here with these barrancas at Pasatiempo that you just don't see at other Alister McKenzie golf courses. Built in 1929 and really, pushed by not just Alister McKenzie, but this is really Marion Holland's golf course.
Okay.
She was the developer. She's the one that bought the land. She worked with McKenzie. She worked with him at Cypress. She worked with him a lot at Augusta. I mean, she was really the money and the brains behind Pasatiempo, and that in itself is really almost more of a unique story. Marion Hollins was inducted to the World Golf Hall of Fame this year. The induction is going to be after the first of the year. It's a really big deal for Pasatiempo. It's a really big deal, obviously, for Marion Hollins' family. But there's a big story behind that. To have a female entrepreneur like Marion Hollins back in the late 20s develop this golf course with this architect. It's a real special story, and there's a lot to it.
Did she have a lot to do with the actual design, do you think?
Well, I know that McKenzie trusted her eye with design more so than anybody else, really. There's a lot of stories, and they touched on it a lot last year at the Masters.
Yeah.
McKenzie couldn't afford to go out to Augusta when they were building it. And he would send her to Augusta during construction to oversee it because he trusted her. She was a U.S. amateur champion. She's a very accomplished golfer, probably one of the best female amateur golfers of her time. And when he couldn't go and do things, he knew that she would do them right. So I believe she had just as much of an influence as anyone on Pasatiempo and ultimately what we see out here today.
That's really a phenomenal story if you think about it in this day and age after all those years. And, we're having this conversation of a woman with that much authority in the 20s, right?
Yeah. And even before she came out here, she's from Long Island and obviously grew up with an extremely wealthy family. Her family had a 600-acre estate in Long Island. Her dad was a very successful banker. But, even before she decided to come out to the West Coast, I mean, she started the first all-female private golf club in Long Island. And this was back in the early 20s.
Yeah.
And it's just unbelievable to think that she was pushing for those types of things back almost 100 years ago now.
Yeah.
And like you
Before
said,
they,
we're talking
yeah,
about the same issues today.
yeah. Before we even had the right to vote, she was doing this kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
that is really quite powerful. You guys have been hosting the Western Intercollegiate now for, I just read this again on your website, doing my homework, 65 years. I did not know it was that long. Is that really? How
It's
long?
longer. I
Is it
think it's
longer?
longer. I think 1952 was the first year we
Wow.
hosted the Western Intercollegiate. I think we're about, maybe this is going to be the 73rd hosting of the Western Intercollegiate. If we do end up hosting it in April this year, I know with COVID and everything that's happened,
Yeah.
we didn't host it this past year, but it's been the longest continuous amateur event, I think, in the country at the same facility.
Wow. So what's that event like for you? What's going on? How many people are coming on? Now I guess last year, 2 years ago, you got full TV coverage for this?
Yeah, so 2 years ago, Golf Channel picked up the Western Intercollegiate and televised it live for 3 days. It was a huge success. Golf Channel loved it. We had a great time. It was a lot of fun. We have a contract, or there's a contract with Golf Channel to continue to televise it live for the next several years, which we're really excited about. But the Western Intercollegiate, I mean, it's one of the best college amateur tournaments in the country. I mean, the colleges that come here and the amount of talent that you see year in and year out is truly amazing. Every year it's really fun because it takes place sort of the weekend of the Masters, or
Right.
it's the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday after the Masters, since it's televised. We go through the Masters tournament every year, and we count how many players played in the Western that are playing in the Masters, and there's always at least 10 players in the Masters that have played in the Western Intercollegiate. So there's the talent level for the Western Intercollegiate. It's extremely high, and it's really fun for us because it kind of kicks off our season in April. We're coming out of winter. We get to really dial in the golf course early in the season and get it ready for high amateur tournament play. And so it's a great event for us, and it's a great event for Pasatiempo.
But these are just college kids. It's all the colleges.
Yeah, this is all college kids. This is a San Jose State University's tournament that they host every year, that they've hosted since the inception.
Wow.
But they invite 12 to 14 other colleges here, and typically out of those 12 to 14 schools, I mean, you have half a dozen top 20 programs in the country that are coming out here to compete.
You getting anybody going east, or is it all West Coast schools?
Mostly it's West Coast schools, but we do have some colleges, like Texas comes out here, North Carolina's come out here. So we are getting some colleges from the Midwest and from the East Coast, but predominantly it's been West Coast schools.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you really have had a laundry list of some of the best golfers in the world come through that tournament. I mean, Tiger was there a handful of times.
Oh, yeah,
right?
Tiger was here, and actually, ESPN televised that final day when Tiger played here, when he was at Stanford.
Yeah.
But if you look at if you go in and look at the winners of the Western Intercollegiate and the plaque in the clubhouse, it's unbelievable. I mean, from Marco Mira to Ken Venturi.
Really?
Oh, it's unreal when you look at, and those are the winners. I mean, just to think of the people that have the participants
didn't win. Yeah.
Yeah, it's truly amazing.
You have a list of that on the wall, the clubhouse, right? The winners.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that. Laundry list is like who's who in golf.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's really quite impressive. All right, so let's talk about you a little bit. Full disclosure, you were a star student of mine at Rutgers. So we met back in when was that? 2002, I think.
2000. Oh gosh, I don't even remember.
It goes back
2001,
something like that.
Somewhere
I think
in there.
I had you in the winter in your last session in the winter. So I think it was 2002 at that point. And you were working at Olympic at the time you were going to school. Where were you working then?
No, I was actually working at the first golf course that I ever worked at, which was Larinconada Country Club, which is just, 15 minutes from here.
Yeah.
The country club in the town that I grew up in. And I was working at that club just as a greenskeeper. And I went to school and worked at that club both years that I was at Rutgers.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. And then from there, what's the history from there? How did you?
Yeah, so I got back. I finished the Rutgers program, and I had been at La Rinconada for a few years, and a opportunity opened up for me, and I accepted an assistant superintendent position at Sharon Heights Golf and Country Club, which is about 25 miles up the peninsula here. And I spent 3 years there, worked for a great superintendent, Mike Rothenberg.
Yep.
We had a great time together. Mike ended up retiring, and right when Mike retired, a position opened up at the Olympic Club in San Francisco, and I accepted an assistant superintendent position at the Olympic Club. I ended up doing 7 years at the Olympic Club, was the assistant superintendent on both golf courses and the superintendent on both golf courses at some point in time over those 7 years, and ended up finishing as the lake golf course superintendent for the 2012 U.S. Open. And then about 6 months after the U.S. Open, opportunity at Pasatiempo.
There you go. Everything's history.
Yeah.
Let me go back to Mike Rothenberg. Why would he hire a Rutgers guy? He's a big
He's a big Penn State guy.
He's Mr. Penn State. I'm shocked that he would actually hire a kid out of Rutgers.
I know. Well, the superintendent I was working for at La Rinconada was a former assistant of Mike's.
Okay.
And he really, helped me out and gave a really good recommendation. And it was just kind of perfect timing for all of us.
Yeah, it's good to mix the blood up a little bit.
Yeah.
So you end up going up to the Olympic Club. Did Pat Finland hire you at the Olympic Club?
Yeah, Pat Finland hired me in 2005.
Okay.
Pat had maybe been there a couple of years, and there was a lot of movement going on up there. And when I was hired, the Open hadn't even been announced yet. In fact, it wasn't.
Oh, really?
No.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, we knew we were going to be hosting the U.S. Amateur in 2007, so that was already on the books. We were hoping to get the U.S. Open, but I think shortly after, probably within a year of myself arriving there, they announced that the Olympic Club was going to be hosting the 2012 U.S. Open. So, immediately going into that situation, you have an amateur coming up in 2 years, and then you're going to have an Open coming up in less than 7 years. Things start happening. Construction starts happening very quickly. Yeah. Everything starts happening for those of us that have gone through preparation for years for a United States Open Championship. It's not that week. It's the years leading up to that week. That week ends up being the easy part.
Yeah, the actual tournament's cake.
Yeah, you got 150 people there. I mean, you got 50 guys to rake bunkers. Yeah. That turns out to be the easy part of everything.
How much construction did you guys end up doing at the Olympic Club prior to getting ready for the Open?
Oh my gosh.
There was a ton. I remember a lot. It was a
ton. It never stopped. I mean, from the driving range to the front entrance to practice facilities. And then ultimately in 2009, the lake course got closed and we did a full renovation of the lake course. So brand new USGA greens, bent grass greens, a ton of tee extensions. It seemed like we touched almost every piece of that property before the Open.
Yeah, there was a lot of work. For people that don't know Olympic well, explain Olympic. So there's a whole bunch of stuff going on over there, and which is the championship side.
Yeah, so there's 45 holes at Olympic Club. So there's 2 18-hole golf courses. There's the lake course, which is the U.S. Open venue. And there's the ocean course, which is the adjacent 18-hole golf course. And then there's an amazing 9-hole par 3 course that's on the ocean that in itself is got to be, one of the top, short par 3 courses in the country, if not the world. It's
that's beautiful.
Unbelievable.
It's absolutely stunning. Yeah.
Yeah.
So most of the work was done on the lake course, though, for getting ready for the Open. Did they complete?
Yeah, most of the work was done on the lake course and, the facilities surrounding the lake course. But then, right before we are to host the U.S. Open, they'd already decided that they were going to rebuild the ocean course. So construction of the ocean course actually started right before the U.S. Open. And we had already rebuilt a couple of greens on the ocean course. And then subsequently, as soon as the U.S. Open ended, the entire ocean course, which was basically all, hospitality and
parking
for the U.S. Open, ended up being completely renovated as well.
Yeah, I remember just nothing but miles of stone being brought onto that property and
Oh,
talking to you guys, thinking, what the heck, what are you going to do with this thing? This is all, you got
miles,
gravel everywhere here,
yeah,
trucks.
miles of roads
It
built
was
throughout the
unbelievable.
entire
Yeah.
facility. I mean, it took 9 months to put it all down, and it took about, I feel like, 6 weeks to get rid of everything. I don't know how
Yeah,
they do that.
exactly. It was really quite impressive. I remember looking at that right after it was over and thinking, "Wow, what are you guys going to do with this stuff?" So, what you were pretty integral to the Open. I mean, Olympic Club is a massive facility. If folks don't know the Olympic Club, I mean, it's just a huge golf course plus that whole San Francisco piece of it all that Pat ended up, and general managing and a massive job. But you really were kind of a spearheading the Open work from the actual on the ground stuff, right?
Yeah, so I mean, agronomically, leading into the U.S. Open, I mean, working closely with the USGA
Yeah.
and recently retired Pat Gross, who's fantastic. Loved doing a championship with him and the entire USGA team and their logistics team. Yeah, I mean, the build out going into the U.S. Open is so massive, and there's so many different pieces to it, which can be just as daunting as the agronomic and the tournament preparation for the U.S. Open. So there's kind of two parts to it. You're getting ready with all the infrastructure, all the trucks, all the tents, working with the USGA on one side of it, which my assistant at the time, Eric Stick, he sort of spearheaded that whole portion of it. And then I just focused on the agronomic and tournament prep for the golf course.
Yeah, which is in its own right a huge, massive undertaking. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
I mean, working with Mike Davis,
yeah,
all the different heights of cut, all the different, fairway, widths and everything that you do in the little short grass areas you end up creating for a U.S. Open. It's a tremendous amount of work and a tremendous amount of planning.
What was the hardest part of having to do all that different height of cut, and what was the hardest part of getting the agronomically? What was the hardest part of getting that thing set up?
It's funny, and Pat Gross kind of knew this going into it. There's so many different heights of cut around the golf course,
Right?
And mapping all that out and making sure that everyone knows exactly where to go, just the logistics of that, and then finding the right mowers. I mean, we had a great partnership with Toro, and Toro obviously does a lot of championships, and they have great people in place. But when someone tells you, well, you're going to mow this at 5.5 inches, and you're going to mow this at 4 inches, and you're going to mow this at 3 inches, and this at 2 inches, and this width and that width, that was one of the most difficult parts, I feel like, is just finding the right pieces of equipment and the right people and the right plan to get it all done every single day.
Wow. So they laid out all of those mowing schedules for you. You had a complete map of what was going to be where and what from the USGA.
Yes, and every hole's different. And
Yeah.
you talk about graduated rough. I mean, starting from the green out, you could have 6 different heights of cut, from the green, and by the time you get 25 yards away from the green.
Yeah.
And
how do you keep that straight? You have a piece of paper in your hand. I mean, how would you even do that?
Maps of all the holes and all the different heights and all the mowers, and you basically have to start, taking crew members and saying, this is going to be your thing for a while, because
you're the 1 inch guy. You're the 2 inch guy
on holes, this, and this, and you know exactly where to go, and we're not going to be changing your job, and this is what it's going to be for a while.
What, did anybody screw up big time? I mean, did you have anybody cut the 2 down to 1?
I don't remember. It's been a while.
It's been a while. I know.
Any massive mess ups with the mowing schedules or anything like that. I mean, overall, I was really happy with how everything agronomically turned out. I thought that the golf course was in fantastic condition. We ended up getting really good weather that week, and obviously it ended up being a great tournament and a great finish.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, it was probably the first tournament I was able to be there from head to toe, and we were fortunate enough to be able to sponsor some of you guys on one of the days. But it was a blast, and it just that particular property just looked so overwhelming to me to be able to do that level of work and attention to detail that you guys pulled off on that. And you had a massive crew and a whole bunch of volunteers there. But it was a wonderful week. It was a great tournament, and the Open is always exciting, regardless of where. But even the logistics of getting in and out. I mean, I went out to I went out to Shinnecock last year, and I made the mistake of going out on Saturday from New York City, and I literally stood on a train for 2.5 hours getting out there, and then you had to wait for a good hour to get back onto this train to get back into the city. So you guys pulled this thing off almost flawlessly, which was really quite wonderful. Let's so you're done with the Open. How quickly did you get the call for Pasatiempo?
So the Open finished in June, and the job at Pasatiempo was posted, I think maybe beginning of December. And so, I applied for it and went through a process and met with the club several times. I don't think I was actually hired on until February of 2013. And then I started middle of March.
So you get to Pasatiempo. What were the things that you needed to get done right away? Was it, obviously it's got a long and strong history, but there'd been a little bit of turmoil there prior to you coming in. Was there a lot of stuff that you had to get taken care of right away?
I mean, there's always going to be stuff. It doesn't matter what type of facility you're walking into as a new golf course superintendent. And it doesn't matter if, the previous superintendent was the most beloved superintendent in the history of superintendents, or if there was some turmoil, there's always going to be stuff that needs to happen. But really what the primary focus was from day one was water.
Yeah.
I was told during the interview process and from the first week that I got to Pasatiempo, and they had already been working on it. Pasatiempo had been working on it for a decade, trying to access alternative source of water for Pasatiempo. So that was really the focus, and it really kind of consumed my first 4 years at Pasatiempo.
I mean, that's what we really want to spend some time talking about today is all the work you've done on water. But let's start backing up and going through this some of the soil stuff, and then let's finish up talking water. But you and I have been spending the last 2 or 3 years now doing what I call a monitoring soil test. So what a monitoring soil test is that you and I take 2 greens every month, the same 2 greens, and you run a paste extract. You send it off to Logan Labs. It comes to my desk, and then you and I chat about it, and it's pretty obvious based on where you are what's going on. I mean, you can see, and the reason why we do this monitoring test, and I think I convinced you to do this a handful of years ago, is that because of that water problem that we'll talk about here, and the sodium in particular, this is the way we were able to really step by step monitor that influx of both sodium and bicarbonate. So by having 2 paste extracts on 2 different greens, we can kind of do, and in your case, it's pretty obvious because you've got this big bell curve. You've got rain coming in the winter, everything flushes out. It looks good as spring comes along. By the time you get to to the summer, it's starting to get a little crusty. And right before we went live on this, I pulled up your soil test and I went, let's not talk about that right now. I don't want to put you in a bad mood until after, until after we have an opportunity to do our podcast. But, this is typically, that November month, September, October, November, for where you are, we're seeing sodium levels coming through the roof. And a lot of that's coming, obviously, if not all of it, is coming from your water. Last year, if you remember this, you hit that stretch, and your weather is doing weird things in Santa Cruz over the last number of years. But you had that stretch, and correct me if I'm wrong here, September, maybe August, where you were hitting 100 degrees? Yeah,
it was September, and it was middle to late September. We had like 5 100-degree plus days over like a 10-day period. And of course, those 10 days were our invitational.
Right.
And then the beginning of core aeration. And,
you weren't busy or anything. And just
no, we didn't.
It was a couple 100 degrees.
There was no stress going on here.
And just so people understand, what's the average temperature yearly at Santa Cruz?
Oh, geez. It's probably like 68.
Yeah,
70.
exactly. And what's the temperature right now? You're all bundled up because you don't have heat in the shop. And it's what you told me this morning. It's 32 degrees, or it's
probably almost 40 now, which is, wow. It's unusually cold right now for us. We probably get 10 frost delays a year.
So when you first got there, did you see 100-degree days?
Not very often. I mean, you get a stretch in the middle of summer where you get 3 days of 90 plus, but this 100-degree weather, and we saw it again this year, where it was 108 degrees here one day.
Yeah,
Um,
that's unbelievable.
it's just POA and Santa Cruz on the coast at 108 late in the season is it's not used to it. Let's put it that way.
So what's your take on the monitoring program, and would you advise somebody to kind of take that kind of extreme data flow that you've been doing for the last 3-4 years?
Oh, most definitely. I think it's been very beneficial for us. What you don't want to have are these big surprises.
Right.
And, we're really good at superintendents of being out there every day and visually seeing how the greens are doing. But you need to have the data to be able to, make conclusions and be sure of what you're actually seeing out there. And sometimes the data is going to show you things that you might not be seeing yet, but you will be seeing, which has been just as important for us. If you're dealing with recycled water use on a golf course, I think it's imperative that you're taking monthly samples on your greens and you're looking at your sodium and bicarbonates, because you have to be able to develop some type of plan and set your thresholds to know when you need to go out and when you need to flush and when you need to put amendments down on the greens. And if you don't have that data, then you're just basically guessing. And, out here on the West Coast, even potable water use on the West Coast, I mean, there's salt in all water. Yeah. And when you're in a climate like us where we haven't had rain basically since May 13th, wow. Substantial measurable rain. When you go that long, even on potable water, you're going to have salt and bicarbonate accumulation over that amount of time. And you need to have a proper flushing program. So being able to monitor it, and now, with some of the software out there that we can graph it, you can take it to a green committee, you can take it to members, you can show other people in simple terms exactly what's going on the golf course, what's going on underneath the surface of the greens. It's extremely valuable information for a golf course superintendent.
You'd mentioned this, but I think it's all about staying ahead of that curve more than it is observing what happened. But it does give us, an opportunity. I'll share this story, and I obviously mean no criticism, because I know in September of last year, you were incredibly busy, but we missed that month, if you remember that. We missed that. And then when we came back in October, you and I were both like, oh my gosh, what happened here? And, of course, you had gone through all sorts of stuff. I mean, 5 days of 100 plus. What were the days around the hundreds? They were still pretty warm, right? I mean, that whole month was pretty warm.
Yeah, it was high 80s, low 90s surrounding all of those days, which in itself would be high.
It might not even, the worst of it was probably the high 90s, not even about the hundreds. But, again, and we'll talk about this, but your water is not the world's greatest. And quite honestly, I take tests of water for clients all over the country. Water is probably the biggest culprit of problems for growing grass anywhere you go. But when you're at 100+ degrees for 5 days, you must have been pouring water out there like it's nobody's business just to keep the thing cooled down and alive.
No, absolutely. And that's some of the things that we learned last year when we kind of went through that stretch of stress, and we started to see a little bit of turf decline at the end of the year. Luckily, and we'll talk about it, I'm sure, we have 3 sources of water. We have recycled water, we have city potable water, and we have a well. And it's really kind of pushed us to kind of think different on how we manage those sources at what times of the year. A lot of the times, unfortunately, you're managing sources to budgetary constraints for a lot of facilities. But on the backside of that, the turf health, especially towards the end of the year, is so important. We definitely had to rethink our watering program this year and make some big changes, especially towards the end of the year. We were switching over, getting away from the recycled water, during aeration and during some of those more stressful times.
You and I have talked a lot over the years on, just making sure that all 3 pieces of the puzzle, the chemistry, the physics, and the biology are working. You've been running physical tests. You've been dealing with biological soil management programming, getting carbon into your system. Everything really ultimately goes down on your property to fighting sodium. especially in this time of year. I mean, if you think about it, the entire agronomic focus, bringing in biology, changing what we're going to talk about next on the water, doing all that work, doing the physical testing, this monitoring program that you and I have been involved in. This ultimately all comes down to, how do we manage sodium?
Right.
Your biggest weakest link and your first limiting factor. And until the rain comes back this winter, it's a battle that accumulates, and that bell curve, hopefully in the next few weeks, knock on wood, starts to fall down, because hopefully Mother Nature will bring you a little bit of water. Let's talk about this. So you've actually been asked to, and have been traveling all over the countryside, talking about the work that you guys did on this water. And unfortunately, I have yet to see your talk, but I would love to see it. I know you were down at Rutgers a year or so ago, and I wasn't around, unfortunately, other than to be able to take you and your lovely wife out to dinner in the city, which was nice. But I missed the talk. But I did get a nice bottle of wine out of it, so that was all good. But the reason why you guys started this project, and I'm going to let you kind of really go through this talk. I mean, it obviously was, you were dealing with crappy water perpetually. I guess, explain how the process works in California. All of for us East Coasterners, this is all foreign to us, because, we don't pay for water out here for the most part. But you guys, it's the biggest line item typically on a California golf course is the water line item. So it's a huge budgetary issue. But not only that, you're spending, some courses I've talked to up in, pushing $1 million a year on water, and the water sucks. And that's an agronomic term I use often to describe crappy water that's rich in sodium and bicarbonates, and ultimately hurts you at the end of the day. So let's talk about the project. Walk me through water as you ran into it, and all the work that you have done at Pasatiempo, and where you are today, and how it's working.
Sure. So when I got to Pasatiempo, droughts are frequent in California. We go through droughts. It's 10, 15 year cycle. You're going to go through a couple of years of a drought, and Pasatiempo had been through quite a few droughts. And basically, the club realized that the current allocation of water from the city of Santa Cruz. So when I got here, 100% of our water was potable city water from Santa Cruz.
And clean and decent and okay.
It was decent. Yeah, it's fine. It was good. It was a good source of water for the golf course. Now the cost of the water was not good for the golf course. And what ended up happening is in 2013, 14, kind of 15, really almost 3 years, we went through one of the most severe droughts that California's ever seen in the last 100 years. We averaged probably 40 inches of rain a year, and we were doing like 15 inches of rain a year.
Yeah, I remember those years.
Just unbelievably low numbers. And so what happened is we ended up getting cut our allocation by 50% one summer.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so, we were already in the process of trying to do some type of recycled water project, but the drought really pushed the envelope, not only with the membership, but more importantly with local city and state governments that we'd been trying to work with to get a deal to purchase this water. Everyone was just kind of on the fence and didn't know, how much money they wanted for it. And there was a lot of roadblocks and really just a lot of red tape and a lot of politics that were getting in the way of Pasatiempo getting some type of deal for recycled water. But once the drought hit, it became apparent to all the different parties involved, and some real champions started to emerge within city government that Pasatiempo needs to get this water. The water was being dumped into the Monterey Bay. I mean, hundreds of millions of gallons a year was just being dumped into the bay, and we were willing to pay for it, and we wanted to use it. So that's kind of where the project started for us. Is we needed to we needed water security, first of all, and we needed it at a reasonable price. We were one of those clubs that was approaching, annually spending about $1 million for water.
Wow, that's unbelievable.
Right now, currently, potable water in Santa Cruz is about $17,000 per million gallons.
Oh my! And you would go through how many millions in the?
55 million gallons a year.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's untouchable.
Yeah, it's untouchable, and there's still a lot of golf courses in this area that are paying that.
Yeah.
And it's not, long term for a golf course to be able to spend that kind of money on water. It's just not really feasible, especially for public golf courses or other golf courses that might not have a revenue stream or private membership that can pay for something like that. It's not sustainable.
No,
So,
not at all.
Not at all. So what ended up happening is a really smart engineer in 1978, year I was born. Good year.
Yeah, it was.
He ended up when they built the outfall pipeline. So there's a water treatment plant about 3 miles above us in the city of Scotts Valley. They have a water outfall pipeline that takes their secondary treated water and basically discharges it into the Pacific Ocean, into the Monterey Bay. That engineer, when he designed that outflow line, he actually teed it off and stubbed it onto Pasatiempo's property, thinking back then in the late 70s that maybe someday Pasatiempo would want that water. And
Really?
it ended up being huge for us, because that's one of the biggest hurdles for golf courses to get recycled water is the infrastructure.
Right.
Infrastructure costs are outrageous. I mean, $1 million a mile to build a pipe, in California, through any type of urban environment. Those costs are usually prohibitive for golf courses to actually access recycled water. So the infrastructure was here. We had the pipeline to the golf course. So now all we needed to do was to actually purchase the water, which was the most difficult part. There were several different entities that were involved that wanted to get paid. So there's we wanted a long-term contract. We needed something that we were going to be able to hang our hat on and know that we were going to have water security for a long period of time, because there was a huge capital cost for us that we needed to put up if we were going to end up using this water. So we secured a 30-year contract with the city of Scotts Valley to receive their secondary treated water. So water that you could not directly use on the golf course, but it's more of what we consider like a raw source of recycled water.
Let me ask you this, Justin. I mean, this guy in 1978 runs the infrastructure to the course. Was water even an issue in like it is today in 1978?
Well, it was. So if you look back through the drought history, there were some. 1981 was one of the worst droughts, probably the second worst drought in the history of California. So, there were droughts obviously in the past. The difference was the cost of water wasn't what it is today.
Right. That's what I'm asking. So in 78, right. But he had division. Was he associated at all with the club, or was he a golfer? I mean, was there any, he just saw this big piece of property and said, hey, this might be a good idea while we're here.
He saw a big piece of property and he saw, you know what, if I put a tee and a couple of valves here and I run it, 300 yards down the street, I could stub it on to potentially a huge end user of this water.
So he just had a foresight. He just had a thought that this would make sense someday down the road.
Yeah, he didn't put any other stubs anywhere else on that 3.5 mile pipeline except to Pasatiempo.
Oh, aren't you guys lucky?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. I hadn't heard that story before. So now you've got a source of secondary water. Explain to everybody again in detail what secondary water really means.
So it basically means that it's had two separate treatments at the wastewater treatment facility. So, raw wastewater comes into a treatment facility into what they call the headworks. It basically gets screened to take any large debris out of it. And then it basically goes into what is like the biological treatment of the water, which is bacteria.
Right.
So it goes into these huge aeration basins that are just inoculated with a tremendous amount of bacteria. It's not actually inoculated. The bacteria is natural. It's already there in the waste, but they obviously feed it with the wastewater, and the bacteria basically breaks down, the organic content of that water. It then goes into what we call a clarifier. That's what you usually see at wastewater treatment plants, is those, large, looks like concrete swimming pools that have the skimmers on top.
Yeah.
And so basically it goes into those clarifiers where some of the solids that are left over that the bacteria couldn't digest sink to the bottom, and some of the solids actually float to the top and they're skimmed off. And then that's basically secondary treated water. So then and that's the water that we receive.
What's the chemistry of that water? It's got to be high in lots of stuff, including nitrogen, I'm assuming.
There is nitrates in the water, and I've run the numbers for us. It's probably a pound a year of N.
Yeah.
Which it's kind of good. And we definitely have made some adjustments with our fertility program since going on the water source. It's like you're getting a little spoon feed every night, which is okay.
When you were up at Olympic, were they on these secondary waters up then, or was that something after you?
No, the Olympic Club was full tertiary treated water from Daly City while I was there.
So you were working, and that's higher nitrates, as I recall.
It is.
What you're dealing with.
The nitrates up there are a little bit higher than they are here in Santa
So they were fighting a little bit of that nitrate coming in. Keep going. So you it's kind of interesting, and you and I've talked about this, but now you're a water expert, and the fact that we're talking about poop, which is my business, not yours. It's kind of interesting that you are such an expert on how this whole process works. But so now you've got an opportunity to grab this secondary water. Yeah. And because you got that pipeline, but you had to do an awful lot of work to make this happen.
Yeah, we had to basically, because before our water source was from the city of Santa Cruz, we didn't even have a pump station. Our water source was fed straight from the city main line. We didn't have a pond, a storage tank, a pump station. We had nothing. So our infrastructure costs ended up being fairly significant because we had to build a pump station. Yeah. We had to build a subterranean 500,000 gallon concrete tank. And then we had to build a tertiary treatment plant to treat the secondary water. So we had about $9 million of capital improvements before we could actually start receiving the water.
This is all on site.
This is all on site.
So you spent $9 million building this treatment facility, essentially a treatment center on your property to bring in the secondary water, so that you now had. How much is this reducing? And you've told me these numbers, but share it with us if you're comfortable with this. So $9 million investment is returned how quickly?
It's probably about 12 years. Is the ROI that we're looking at. It's not bad. And we have a 30-year deal for the water. So, at 12 years, I mean, once, this thing gets paid off, it's going to be a tremendous, source of cash for the club in order to do other, infrastructure or golf course improvements.
Does this take water bills down to zero, or does it just reduce it significantly?
It takes water bills down to how much potable water we want to use. So we do have a well. So, back to kind of the whole water source or kind of our water portfolio, we have 3 sources of water now. We have the secondary water that we receive that we treat to a tertiary level on site. We have a full-time wastewater operator here. We're running a full tertiary water treatment plant at the golf course. We have a well that produces 10-15% of our annual usage, which we utilize. And then we have access to as much potable water as we like. And we could mix those 3 sources any way that we wish to on the golf course. So the potable water bill ends up just kind of coming out to how much we think we need to use by looking at monthly soil tests, base extract tests, and seeing how much we really want to be flushing these greens and how much potable water we want to be putting out on the golf course.
By the way, based on today's test, you might want to bring in a little bit of potable water, just to get rid of some of that stuff so that it's not there. But so how do you make? How often do you actually do this blending? Is this a common practice that you're bringing in all 3 sources, or are you living off the tertiary primarily? What's the mix?
Well, it's changed. It's evolved. It's taken, we just finished our 3rd season with recycled water operating the treatment plant. And every season you kind of learn something about how to do it better. And when we first started, obviously the goal was, let's use as much recycled water as we possibly can. We just spent $9 million. We want to save as much money as we can. And, the first year was really just trying to get the treatment plant running right and to learn how to operate the treatment plant. And and to learn kind of all the intricacies of water treatment. And it was a huge learning curve for myself, and obviously for the club, and then ultimately the water treatment operator that we hired. Every treatment plant is different. And the first year was just trying to get everything to work right. The second year, go ahead.
This operator is full-time?
We have a full-time wastewater treatment operator. We are required to by the state, since we are what they consider a tier 3 tertiary treatment plant. We must have a full-time water treatment operator.
And what does that person do? I mean, what's the day-to-day job?
Yeah, I mean, basically, unfortunately, during the irrigation season, that person is literally 24 hours a day monitoring that treatment plant, because the treatment plant almost never stops running. And so, luckily now with technology, everything is remote, and we have access to it on our phones and on our computers and iPads and everything else. But his job, in a nutshell, is that thing doesn't stop running. It's always making water.
It's always working.
So whatever needs to happen, that our water treatment operator is out there. I'll get a call in the morning. He was there from midnight to 2 o'clock in the morning because there was some alarm went off, or there was some issue with the water, or something had to be reset, or
was this the time the thing flooded and you couldn't open the doors?
We're not going to get into that story.
Okay, good. Let's not.
No, but there's always things going on. There's a ton of, obviously, very specific equipment that has to be constantly calibrated, turbidity meters, pH meters, everything that goes along, chlorine analyzers. There's a ton of very, very technical equipment that our treatment operator has to make sure is running properly every single day.
I've been in this building with you, and it's overwhelming how technology is just filling this place up. I mean, it's a ton of stuff in there. It's it looks like any laboratory. It's quite impressive. And it's
I mean, we have a treatment facility, and then we kind of have our own little mini lab. I mean,
exactly.
We basically purchased all the same lab equipment that you would send water samples off to the lab. We have to do a daily coliform test because of our permit. We have to test for coliform every single day that we make water and send it out to a lab. It's more than just, hitting a couple of buttons and letting the water come in and filter and disinfect. There's a tremendous amount of reporting and work on the back end of the treatment facility that, as a golf course superintendent getting into this project, you have absolutely no idea.
So has the city come to you yet now offering you jobs to run their facility, since you're now an expert? Not only are you an expert agronomist, but now you're an expert human waste manager, if that's a nice word to say.
It's interesting. It's when I talk to young adults that are looking for careers, I am always pointing them now towards wastewater, because
certainly in California,
it's huge, and it's in demand. It's going to become in more demand, and it's a great career. And in going through this process and learning what I've learned about wastewater, and learning about all the different classifications and different grades of wastewater operators, it's definitely something that I encourage individuals to look into.
Yeah. Hey, poop's a great business. I've been doing it for years.
As well.
It's something that I would encourage as well. I interrupted you, so you're kind of going down a path here and kind of walking us through this material. So you're blending all three. You've got, I'm not even sure we're going to get back on track, but this facility is on property. Do you have a lot of superintendents calling you and coming to look at this thing?
Any superintendent that comes and visits me definitely wants to look at the treatment plant.
Yeah.
I do get, several phone calls a year from other golf course superintendents, primarily in California, that are kind of starting the process. They're kind of trying to figure out, who do I call? Who do I need to talk to? How do I figure out how to get recycled water? What was your process? And so I walk them through our story and what we did and how we came to be. But every single situation is different. Everyone's needs are different depending on where you're at in California. About 35% of golf courses in California are using recycled water right now. And I think that number is only going to continue to rise. Our situation is unique and different because we have our own treatment facility, which I don't think there's another golf course that has a full tertiary treatment plant on site.
Yeah, that was my next question. Has anybody done this?
No one's really done this. And but I encourage superintendents to try to do it if they can, because if you can get a raw source of water like we got, we receive secondary water, it's very cost effective because we're getting such a great rate for the water. What happens in other areas of California, and especially on the West Coast, is you might be able to buy tertiary water from your local city or municipality, but they're charging you 75% of what potable water costs. So now you're getting a slight discount from potable water, and then you're getting all the problems with potable water.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the ramification of some of this. We just looked at your paste extracts. You're, in the 40 percentile on the paste. Now, this is just a SciAble test, so it's not the end of the world, and it sounds bigger than it is. But what's your process when it comes time to flush? What are you doing? How are you getting rid of the sodium out of the soil profile, and how much of a headache is that? Obviously, this time of year is probably the worst because it's accumulated for the most part of the summer.
Right. I mean, when you're looking at the salt or looking at the sodium, especially out here, you're never going to get it to where it was in the spring, no matter what you do.
No, of course not.
You're just managing it, and you're just trying to keep that curve as low as you possibly can. Unfortunately, the longer we go in California without rain, the farther behind you end up getting. So obviously we have a flush program out here, and that's changed the last couple of years for sure. We used to flush every month kind of on the dot, and we've talked about this a lot. Every 30 days we go out and we flush, and we come out with gypsum, and then we come out the next day with 0050, and we do it with a wetting agent. And what was happening is that, I couldn't get enough. If I wanted to water as much as I want to every 30 days, just because the weather's so mild out here, the greens would just be too wet in between. You'd have two prolonged periods of time with moisture, and it was really taken away from the playability of the golf course. This year, we really changed the flushing program, and we focused more on EC, and we focused more on, what's our threshold for EC? We're going to go off more of an EC based flushing program, and it's some of the work that I did with the USGA agronomy team as well, and in talking with them about it. And I actually really like the way the program worked out this year. Instead of going out every 30 days, we're probably going out every 6 weeks or so, but we were putting out 4 or 5 times the amount of potable water on the greens. And I think what we ended up seeing is that we were getting better playability and turf conditions in between the flushes. We were able to maintain the sodium at the same levels that we had seen in previous years. And we weren't seeing that decline that we were starting to see in turf health in that late August and September time. Now, unfortunately, we're seeing a little bit of decline right now, and it's November and we haven't had any rain, but I couldn't put enough water down on these greens right now to flush what I need to flush. And it's 32 degrees outside. They'd be saturated, and the playability would just be nothing. So, right now we're just really kind of in that window of time where we just really need to get some of our heavy rains. And what we saw last year, and we saw this through the monthly paste, is that it took 10 inches of rain to really flush through completely to kind of get us back to what I call our base.
So you go through a droughty winter where you're not getting that kind of rain. You're starting the next year already behind the 8 ball with the sodium complex.
Exactly.
I'll throw you an accolade as well, because I've been working with you for a while, but I think a lot of what you're seeing as well is that you're changing some of the biological profiles of your soil. And that biological profile, by providing carbon, some humic acids to the system, that's one of the best ways to sequester those kind of high levels of sodium. Obviously, the water is driving this, and again, like you said, a majority of guys on the West Coast and now all across the country are dealing with these potable water, or these tertiary waters, and they're not good. They're sodium rich, they're nitrate rich, they're bicarbonate rich. But even well waters, and I travel the country, and some of the worst waters are down in Texas and Oklahoma. I mean, these are just horrible waters to try to grow grass on. And I use in one of my classes a water sample from the Midwest somewhere, and the water is so high in salts that I'm not even sure they can grow grass without burning everything. It's that bad. But one of the best ways to obviously manage that is to monitor it but also to build some kind of a biological support system that allows to sequester it. And you guys have done such a great job on this. Amazingly enough, we have run up against an hour. I told you this would be very easy. Are you still doing the talk? Are you still being asked to give this water talk that you've been given a couple times?
I do get asked probably at least once a year with some type of organization to go and speak. It's unfortunately just with my family life and little kids, it's not as easy to get away from here as I'd like to. But no, I still do get asked to talk about what we do here because it is such a unique situation.
Yeah. You know, maybe what I'll do is, if you don't mind, I'd love to have you do that for us. We'll put it up on our website and put it out virtually so that it's there, because the information is huge. I mean, water management is one of the most important things, and you guys have done this incredibly well. And stop me if this is too personal a question. The $9 million you guys spent, was that all club money, or was there any kind of support money coming in from that?
We tried to get support, believe me. We turned over every single rock we possibly could, but because we are a private business, we could not get any help or grants or anything like that in order to help us out. So this is 100% self-funded project.
Yeah. Wow. That's quite a commitment. I mean, I give you guys all the accolades possible. I mean, the commitment and the investment, and knowing that on the back end of this, the ROI is going to be huge. And not only will you have better economics, but you'll also have better agronomics as time goes on. And the fact that you can still blend in potable water, and I'm sure you and I will be talking about this for years to come. What's the right blend? What's the magic? It's like making a cocktail. You got to find the right mix to get the water working. And maybe right now, potable would be a good investment based on some of the soil tests that we've seen.
Well, it changes every year. I mean,
yeah,
like I said, every year. I mean, COVID this year, it changed everything. It changed the water quality. It changed the amount of water that we get. So it was another curveball for this year.
And you're getting a boatload more play. So you've got a lot more physical pressure on the golf course. So why would COVID affect the cost of water? What's the dynamic?
Not the cost, but the quality. So, you think about, you have a water treatment facility that's receiving wastewater. When every single business shuts down, you think about all that industrial and commercial waste is not going into the sewer system anymore. It's not going through the treatment plant. The water quality actually improves dramatically because wastewater treatment plants are built to process human waste better than anything, not necessarily commercial and industrial waste. So when you take all that away, you have great quality water, but you don't have as much. So the flows went way down this year because all the businesses and industries were closed. So it definitely was just a whole nother learning curve for us into how we manage that with receiving less water than what we were accustomed to.
Wow, that's interesting. Wow. Well, listen, my friend, I need to thank you for spending the hour with me and for all your support over these years. And we will chat again. And hopefully someday I can get out there and sit on the porch and drink your brother's wine, because that's really what I'd rather.
I'm looking forward to it.
I'm looking forward to it. But thank you for joining me on this, and I wish you the best of luck as time goes on with the water thing. And let's catch up maybe early next week, because I do want to talk about the last battery of pace. I'll send them over to you when I get a chance to go. But thank you for joining me today.
All right, thanks, Joel. It was great.
Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, for listening. That is the Earthworks podcast. We are available wherever podcasts are found and on our website at soilfirst.com. So please join us for another podcast coming up next week. Thank you very much.